What advice would you give an aspiring investor who's 6 to 12 months behind you?
Just start doing something. First of all, I guess figure out what it is you're even wanting, like why real estate. You asked me what is my fiery why earlier. If you don't have a why, you're going to get burned out in this industry almost immediately. So figuring out why and where you want to head, and then just getting started. I think one big myth is that you can go out and you can take massive action immediately. How many people do you really know that go out having no experience in real estate, no money, no nothing, and buy 1,000-unit property their first deal? Just them. It doesn't happen. You take baby steps.
Welcome to the Diary of an Apartment Investor podcast. I'm your host, Brian Briscoe with Four Oaks Capital. I'm very excited for today's show. It's one of our first deal series, and we're talking with a guy who seems to be absolutely on fire right now, Josh Ferrari. And he recently closed on a 42-unit apartment complex in Mobile, Alabama for a purchase price of $1.85 million. And we'll be talking about that today with him. So, Josh, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me, Brian. I know we've been struggling to try to work this out. So I'm glad we're finally able to make it happen.
And we were trying, just for everybody else's benefit, we were trying to get you on as an aspiring investor, right? And have you ask the question to, an experienced investor, but you went ahead and closed on a 42 unit and now a 34 unit. What was the second property?
Yeah.
Okay. 34 unit. And you have one other under contract right now too. So yeah, I kind of felt that, all right, you're kind of past that aspiring thing. So you kind of disqualified yourself from the podcast, from that part of the podcast. Man. So here we go. First deal episode. This is awesome. But congratulations on your success. And just for everyone else's sake, we've talked a couple of times, and incidentally, I've been on his podcast. And let's start with that. Talk a little bit about your podcast. Tell everybody what your podcast is about.
Yeah. So my podcast is called Creative Capital. It's primarily based around, when I was creating it, everyone wants to be different.
Yep.
And I didn't want to make it around one specific niche of real estate. Like I didn't want to just be multifamily or single family or talk about one specific industry inside of the overall industry of real estate. Mm-hmm. So I titled it Creative Capital with the idea to bring on folks, individuals inside of the business that are professionals in all different aspects, to discuss any creative strategy out there possible to either preserve or, grow your wealth inside of real estate investing.
Mm-hmm. Nice. How's that gone for you so far?
It's, the thing I love the most about it is that I learn something new every time I have someone on. We're talking about capital raising one day, then we're talking about someone buying $5,000 in one transaction the next. And the next day I'm talking about a guy that's telling me I can create a trust and not have to pay capital gains or property taxes. And I'm like, all right.
Yeah. Yeah. That's one thing that I've noticed with the podcast myself. I mean, I started this podcast a year ago. We had closed on our third deal, and we were just about to close on deal number 4, and being able to talk to people who were, light years ahead of me, has really helped me out as well. And I've been able to solidify a lot of the things that, I may have been shaky on early on just by hearing many experienced operators over and over talk about the same fundamentals. So, podcasting, it's a good way to meet people, and it's a good way to learn a lot. I think that's probably one of those intangible things that it's really hard to quantify, but that's been my favorite thing about podcasting. So, but cool. So that said, why don't you give us a little bit of background and history? Tell us a little bit about you and what got you into apartment investing.
Yeah. So I initially got the bug, or the itch, you could say, for real estate about a little over 3 years ago. My dad called me up after I had just moved out of the house, moved states away, to start what I thought was going to be my longstanding career as an aircraft technician. Well, then he calls me up one day, tells me him and my mom are going to start flipping houses. And I thought that was kind of weird. They said they were going to pay $20,000 each to get one of those guru courses to tell them, everything that they needed to know. At the time, I'm like, okay. So we had this 4-hour conversation, and that was what really piqued my interest inside of real estate. So then after that, I actually read 40 books that year, and I was
Mhm.
21 at the time. It's more books than I've ever read in my entire, 21 years of living. And I went to 3 different real estate meetups, and I was listening to a bunch of different podcasts. I was extremely intrigued in the industry. So we ended up getting into wholesaling initially, did that for 5 to 6 months, closed no deals,
Mhm.
just threw a bunch of money away on marketing. Then I said, well, we want to get in the buy and hold anyway. So let's jump into a house hack. And
Mhm.
so the best way that I wanted to house hack was not renting the rooms out and having people live inside the same walls as me.
Right.
So I wanted to do a small multi. So I started doing research on multis. We ended up buying a fourplex, house hacking it, quote unquote, syndicating it. I got my dad to pay for the down payment and he got a
Mhm.
piece of equity out of it.
Yep.
Um, and that was kind of our entry to investing as a whole, but then also into what the powers of multifamily could really do. So then I
Mhm.
started researching deeper and deeper into multifamily and what was possible. Then I ended up finding out about syndication. I ended up finding a mentor. Fast forward to today, I now have 2 other business partners, and we've got about 90 units in our portfolio
Mhm.
with another 148 under contract and another 88 we're getting ready to get under contract and another 400 to 500 units worth of LOIs out right now.
Nice. All right. So one question for you that I hope hits home with a lot of people. How old are you?
I'm 24 now.
Okay. 24, 90 units, and you're 24 years old. Okay. So, I've heard a lot of people talk about, and honestly, I think being young is somewhat of a barrier to entry. But I mean, you took that barrier and just grabbed your sledgehammer and, pushed right through it, I guess. But, you know, were there any difficulties because of your age getting into this industry?
I'll tell you what, there were.
Mhm.
From the sheer standpoint of getting investor interest, of
Yep.
people wanting to give me money, to brokers taking me seriously for
Hmm.
even giving me an opportunity that would make sense.
Yep.
And the best way that I broke that barrier was actually name dropping. So it
Hmm.
was kind of like my association, my
Hmm.
network with folks. And
Yes.
so I was almost able to take immediate credibility from other people that were
Hmm.
highly credible in the industry. And I remember one phone call specifically, I was talking to this broker, and it was going like, I guess a regular broker call would go on your
Hmm.
first typical, like, exchanging pleasantries and him asking me, what type of properties I'm interested in. And it's the same thing everyone else is looking for, B2C class,
Yep.
looking for like 50.
Value add.
Yeah,
Yep.
value add 50 to 100 units, something along those lines. And he's like, getting sleepy on the phone call because he's
Hmm.
telling me he gets like 100 of these calls a day. And then
Hmm.
he's asking me what really made me stand apart. And I was trying to pitch myself, saying, I got a lot of drive. It's not something you can like teach people. Other people might be interested in this, but they're maybe not as hardworking. And I was trying to pitch it, but he wasn't having it.
Hmm.
I wasn't able to like prove anything.
Yep.
So then towards the end of the call, I think the conversation kind of transitioned a little into some of the deals that he was doing currently,
Hmm.
maybe some of the opportunities he had and whether or not something like that would be of interest to me. And he talked about one deal in particular. And I remember my mentor was actually the one that had just sold the deal. Like the
Hmm.
deal that he was saying he was brokering. He's like, yeah, we just sold this deal. I'm like, oh, that I know my mentor actually, Jeremy, he had
Yeah.
that, he was
That
the
was
one
his
selling it.
apartment. Yeah.
And he was like, wait a second.
Jeremy?
Yeah, Jeremy. And you could just tell, like,
Yeah.
I couldn't see his face because of the phone call, but I could tell like his eyes lit up, his face
Hmm.
got wide. He was all into the conversation now. Then we ended up ending the combo. And what went from, he was initially going to send me no deals,
Hmm.
and it was going to be just another phone call that he had,
Yep.
to then we got off the phone and he sent me 5 deals in my inbox. And I
Yeah.
was like, this guy had the 5 deals all along. It was
Yeah.
just a matter of seeming credible so that I could
Yeah.
get access to them.
And I mean, in that broker's head, the question he's trying to ask on that first call is, am I going to waste my time with this guy? He gets 100 of those calls, a week or a month. He gets a lot of calls like that. And his question is, am I going to waste my time? And one thing that I think I see over and over on this podcast and just talking from to other people is you are able to borrow the credibility of people who are on your team, and that really goes far in a lot of circles, so if you're working with somebody who's established and you use their name, you use their, obviously you have to have their permission to do it, but you borrow their credibility and that'll get you into a lot of doors, right? So good on you on that one. I think that's a solid lesson learned for a lot of people. But All right. So let me ask you a question before we move into exactly what this first deal looked like. What is your big burning why? What's your motivation for all this?
I like that question. My
Yeah.
big burning why's got to be, I guess, what most people's is, which is
Mhm.
just family.
Yeah.
I want to create generational wealth. I want to spend. We don't have any kids yet,
Hmm.
but we're, in the process of trying to have kids,
Hmm.
and I want to start preparing my financial life, preparing my physical life, my time to be utterly and completely available. Like I
Yeah.
want to have a business that can be almost self-sustaining to
Hmm.
where I don't ever want to like not work. I'm 24 years old. I'm not like dying down now, I'm not
Hmm.
ready for retirement. I'm ready to start
You're
going and
ramping
work.
up. Yeah.
Right, but I want to work smart. I want to
Hmm.
work calculated, and I want that to produce enough income and just have the lifestyle to where I can go to all the soccer practices, the ballets, the swimming. I don't know
Hmm.
what they're going to be interested in or if they're going
Yeah.
to be interested in any of that, but I
Yeah.
want to be totally involved in my kids' life and just with my family. We want to travel more. I've got a burning fire
Hmm.
passion for aviation. I don't know if you the video for here, but I'm actually wearing an airplane shirt right now. So
Hmm.
I'm an aircraft technician by day, but I'm getting out of that to transition full time into this business because I want to be a pilot. I want to be a pilot for fun, not, for money
Not
or
not
anything,
not a
but I want to
commercial
own my
airline
own
pilot.
airplane.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, no, no. So I know that's going to take time. I know that's
Yep.
going to take more money. And so it all kind of ties together, but family's the big why.
Well, being several years ahead of you, I mean, I've got 5 kids. I'm about 20 years older than you, but I got 5 kids. I can tell you what, there have been times in my lives where I have not been able to do that. I have not been able to be at the games. I have not been able to do what I've wanted to do, and it's really had an impact. It's part of my why too. Wanting to be there for my kids, but just happy for you that you've realized that at age 24, and you're already working on it. I was working on it, just kind of took a different path that took me a lot longer to get there. But all right, so let's hop in and let's start talking about first deal, this 42 unit in Mobile. So my understanding is we probably should start talking first about how you met your mentor.
Yeah. So, we talked a little bit off screen that I actually found the deal
Mm-hmm.
through my mentor. It's actually his
Yes.
deal that he was
Uh-huh.
selling. So the way I found him, when we had just the fourplex and we were doing that, and I was still learning about
Mm-hmm.
multifamily and briefly knowing about what syndication was, there was a meetup that was happening at one of the 3 local meetups that I was going to,
Mm-hmm.
and there was a guest speaker coming over from Pensacola with me down here in Mobile, Alabama, and the topic was going to be multifamily syndication. And I had already been a little interested in it, but I didn't know a whole lot about it, didn't know what was possible, and I was like, this dude knows what he's talking about. The email had like a
Mm-hmm.
bio of this guy. I was like, this guy's killing it. He knows what he's doing. So I was like, I gotta go. I gotta go to this meetup and learn everything that I can. So I went. He talked about multifamily syndication. The meeting basically solidified everything that I thought that I knew, plus a ton more. All these
Mm-hmm.
new opportunities and ideas and things that you could do inside of multifamily syndication. I'm like, this is it. This is what I need to do. This is the path I'm going to take. And so I talked to him afterwards, the speaker,
Mm-hmm.
found out we both had aviation in common. He's actually a helicopter pilot in the Navy. And
Nice.
so that was kind of how we clicked. And then after that, he agreed to allow me to take him out to lunch that next week. I took him out to lunch, found out that I was completely ignorant to anything multifamily syndication. Anything I
Mm-hmm.
thought I knew, I didn't know, which was good. He kind of put me in my place, let me know what I still needed to learn, things like the right direction to go to. And then from there, he just kind of became my mentor. So it wasn't a mentor that I paid for. It wasn't a program. It was a very organic relationship. And it was also a different kind of relationship in terms of when a lot of people think of a mentor, they think of someone that's going to give them deals, give them investors, introduce them to all these brokers, bring them money, do all these awesome things for them. And in a way, he was a lot different than that. I can't say he never brought me a deal. He brought me
Yep.
our first
He did.
deal,
Yep.
but he never actually brought us like an outside deal, you could say, from a
Mm-hmm.
different broker, or a deal that he never let me like partner on a deal that he was doing. He never brought me alongside. He didn't introduce me to any of his investors. He was basically there for Q&A. So
Mm-hmm.
anytime I had any possible question that you could fathom inside of real estate, investing, multifamily, whatever, he had the answer and the
Yeah.
route that he took and the route that he thinks would be good for me to take based on what he knew about me as an individual. And so that was huge for me. Even though he wasn't introducing me to all these folks and giving me all this money, I knew the direction I needed to take. And so that was kind of a relationship.
Yeah, and that's probably the best way to go about it. Just a natural, mentorship relationship. A lot of people, I had a hard time with that. I tried, I went to a lot of meetups and couldn't quite find that one person for me. So I paid for mentorship. There's different ways to do it. I think ideally yours is probably the best way to do it, to find that natural mentor. But once again, it's difficult. But I will point out that it took out you're taking action, and that's what really helped. You were going to the meetups. After the meetup, you talk to the speaker. That's key. I've been to a lot of meetups where maybe one or two people come and talk to me after, and that's it. So you're not going to find a mentor unless you're approaching people. And I think the third thing on that one is you took them to lunch the next week. That's huge. Just offering to add some sort of value. Buying lunch is at least a little bit of value. That's quite honestly, that's probably enough for me to say yes to a 30. Lunch probably takes about an hour. An hour. Sit down with somebody, but a lot of goodness there. So you got your mentor. Understand two other people in the deal. Let's talk about how you found the other people on your team as well.
So yeah, bringing in the partners. Mm-hmm. The first partner that I had initially was just two of us. It was myself, and it was Reggie, and he is our primary asset manager. And I always thought that he was going to be the capital raiser and everything as well when we first built our relationship. But the way I found him, he actually technically found me. It's funny because he lives in Gulf Shores and I live in Mobile. So we live like 30 minutes from each other, but he found me on Bigger Pockets, this like international website. Yeah. And so he just found me somehow. I guess he was searching multifamily or something and found me, reached out to me, was like, hey, realize that, see that you're local, would love to connect with you and see if there's any synergy or something there. Mm-hmm. And I was like, yeah, sure. And the intent of the connection was not to be a partner whatsoever. Mm-hmm. It was just like, let me just meet this dude. I think he seems like a cool dude. Seems like he knows what he's doing. Seems like he's got some experience. So let's see what he's all about. See if I can add any value to him. Mm-hmm. So I met up at this coffee shop, and he walks in. I see him, and he's this like huge, like jacked dude. Like looks like a professional bodybuilder. And I'm like kind of scared, a little intimidated here because I was like this little scrawny guy, and he's this big dude. So initially, the conversation started leading to like working out and, like, are you a bodybuilder? Like, is that like something in your past life? Do you do that?
Is that a hobby or is that your profession? Right.
Yeah. He's like, no, I just enjoy doing it. And it's something that I do, twice a day, like this. Yeah. This dude that's like in love with working out. And I'm like, well, I too really like to work out, not nearly as much as you, but it was like a little something of what we connected on there. And then we jumped into, conversating about, our personal lives. And we jumped right into real estate at first. And so found out that he had been flipping homes for like 10 years, but that he was interested in getting into multifamily. He had kind of thought about the idea and wanted to jump into it. And I was like, yeah, that's actually what I'm doing. I'm diving into, multifamily syndication. And, obviously I haven't closed a deal yet. The only deal I've done is a fourplex, but I'm trying to learn as much as I can about it. I've got a mentor and who knows, maybe we could eventually kind of partner up or something. If there's something that we're both kind of interested in, we both kind of like the same markets. And it like sparked that initial thought of, partnering up, but still wasn't like totally thinking about it or thinking that was going to be something that was plausible. Then I also found out he was a bass player in a band and I've been a drummer for like 15 years. And so I'm like, dude, we got to jam together, man. Yeah. Like this is awesome. We're both musicians. Mm-hmm. And it was just a couple little like small things of all these things that we both really liked doing with like similarities. And then we jumped into the conversation of like, what did he actually enjoy doing inside of real estate? I found out he loved, the asset management side of it, the financial side, all that stuff. And I was like, well, that's great because I hate that. Going through the fourplex that I had gone through, I had to do all that and I hated it. And I was like, what I do like is investor relations. I love talking to people. I love, getting on stuff like this, like a podcast, sharing my story, creating relationships with folks. And he was like, well, I'm an introvert, so that works out great. Yeah. And so it was like, Cool. So we kind of went our separate ways
Mhm.
after that and didn't really talk to each other about 2 months. And then he actually found a deal. It was actually a single
Mhm.
family portfolio that kind of came across his desk. And it was like we could syndicate it. You know, it kind of checks all the boxes of multifamily other than
Yep.
actually being multifamily.
Mhm.
And so I was like, yeah, I'd love to partner up with you. And he called me up and that was kind of the start to our connection there.
So good. So a couple things that I pull from there, and there's a lot of similarities to our story as well. I met Eric Shirley. He's the first of the Four Oaks partners that I met, and it was very similar. It was I saw him in a different forum and realized we had a couple similarities, and contacted him. And one thing that you never know when you contact somebody how far the relationship's going to go. In our case, it turned out into Four Oaks, and we've got a sizable portfolio right now. In your case, same thing. You made that, I guess that leap of faith. You took a chance on someone, sat down and had lunch with them, and eventually it led into, something that bloomed into blossomed into a partnership. So let's talk now about getting that first deal. Tell us, basically how you guys got it under contract, and let's go from there.
Yeah, so this goes back to my mentor, which I think is
Mhm.
why we were really discussing it earlier. He actually emailed me randomly one
Mhm.
August sunny afternoon sometime last year in 2020.
Yep.
And the message just kind of went like, "Hey, I've got this deal. I think you remember it. You know, I've talked to you about it a couple
Mhm.
times because we
Yeah.
had discussed some things." And he said, "But I'm actually thinking about selling it. I was thinking about getting rid of it, kind of dispersing the partnership that I have inside that deal, and continuing to move forward in the new entity that he had created with his other partner."
Mhm.
And so he said, with that, I've been talking to some brokers. We're looking at selling it for this price.
Mhm.
If we have to go through a broker, and we probably won't sell it until early January, February of 2021.
Mhm.
But here's the proposition that I wanted to throw your way. He said, I know you've been you've been striving to get a deal. You've written a ton of probably hundreds of LOIs up to that point, but nothing's really came through for you guys. You guys have been analyzing deals. I think you and Reggie are like a power team.
Mhm.
Really like what you guys have going on. So if you think that you can close on this deal before the end of the year,
Mhm.
if you even want it, and then if you think that we can close it without having to go through a broker, then I'll give you a $400,000 discount on this deal. And I like emailed back so quick, like, dude, yeah,
Yes. Yeah.
please, all the info you got. Love to start analyzing, and then shoot
Mhm.
that over to my partner who runs a lot of the financial underwriting and everything.
Mhm.
So that was kind of how we found it.
Yeah.
It really just kind of came our way through an organic relationship.
And part of that, there's a couple of things to dissect with that one. Is a lot of sellers are more interested in a smooth transaction than they are in price. So he was able to give a little bit, or he was willing to give a little bit on price to not have to go through the broker process, multiple bids, multiple offers, and then hoping that one of those teams actually comes through. And I've heard said, I haven't seen any specific studies or anything. I heard said that about half the deals that get under contract end up falling out. So, in this case, obviously there's broker commissions and a lot of things, he's going to pay the broker. So there's a little bit of give there, but he was willing to basically knock, what is this? Look at the numbers, 10% off the deal price or more. That'd be 20. Anyway, he was able to knock a significant part of the deal price off, just because you were a known quantity, number one. You guys had a relationship, and it would save him trouble and maybe a little bit of stress in the long run. So great. So you guys looked at it, you analyzed it, and you said, yes, we're going to take this, right?
Right.
All right. So deal numbers, 42 unit complex just outside of Mobile, Alabama. And I think we talked earlier, $1.85 million purchase price, right?
Right.
Okay. So let's talk about raising the capital for this one. What was the amount of capital you guys had to bring to the table?
So the amount of capital that we initially thought we were going to have to bring was 650. It ended up
Okay.
being 605 because we didn't quite need as much capital. But it's a funny story on the capital raise
Mhm.
because we got that deal, and he mentioned it in August. We ended up actually getting it under contract in September of that year.
Mhm.
But it was July of that same year that I did a money raising challenge,
Mm-hmm.
a 30-day money raising challenge. And previous to the challenge, had only raised like $100,000. So I
Mm-hmm.
never really thought I was going to be the capital raiser on this deal. I thought it was going to be, or I was really going to be leaning on Reggie, and I was just going to handle a lot of the communications. And, I brought the deal in. And so that was kind of going to be my value add. Well, I did this challenge and raised $6 million in 30 days. And I was like, holy cow, maybe I know what I'm doing here. Maybe I need to be the capital raiser. So jumping into it, I'm like, I got $6 million. Like,
Yeah.
I'm ready to go. Let's do this thing.
Now let's qualify the $6 million. Was this soft commits? I mean, obviously no
Yes.
money was transferred hands. You
Yes.
just soft committed people. Okay. So you
Right.
soft commit people, hey, is this something you're interested in? Would you invest, $50,000, $100,000 with me if I had a deal? Right.
Yeah. Figuring out where their money was coming from, how much money they
Mhm.
actually had,
Yep.
what they would be comfortable actually giving me on like a sample deal.
Yep.
Yeah. And so that's how I came up with the $6 million number. So I'm thinking I'm high in the sky. I'm ready to go. There's going to be no issues here.
Yeah.
Capital
You're
raise,
like
easy
6
breezy.
million, 600,000 is I'll do that in 2 minutes.
Yeah.
Right.
That thing's coming so easy.
Yep.
Well, we actually got into, this was 2-3 months later when we actually started raising money from having done that challenge. And it was so much more difficult to actually get hard commits on this capital than I had ever imagined that it would be. So I had $6 million in soft commits. And when it came down to it, I only actually raised about $350,000. I'm like, what in the world? Where's the rest of this money? And, having conversations with folks, a lot of them are saying, well, I had money 3 months ago, but, I'm not just waiting around for you to find a deal. So I've since moved the money elsewhere. I'm in another deal. I've got this other thing going. Or they were scared about the economy because it was during COVID. They were like, yeah, I'd invest with you, but maybe if the economy was a little better. Or I don't really like Mobile as a market, or all these different reasons, which are valid reasons. I don't want to force anyone to give me money, but it was like, man, it sucks. All these people were like ready to go. And then I it took too long. Timing wasn't right. Economy's not right. All these things aren't lining up. So it's
deals
a lot
not
more
right,
difficult,
or whatever. Yeah. Lots of issues there. Yeah. And I think that's a common trend among a lot of people is some people grossly underestimate how much they can raise, but I think most people overestimate how much they can raise. And realize that it's a lot more difficult than it seems. So anyway, yeah. So go on. So you raised 300 and change, 350, and you have to get to 600,000.
Right. So Reggie brought 350. He brought about 150. So we're like 500,000 now. I think we need about another 150,000. So 150,000 shy. We've talked to everyone we could possibly know to talk to. We're doing a 506B offering, so I can't just blast it out to everyone. I can't just accept any Joe Blow, Sally Mae individual. I've got to have a few conversations, and we're about 3 weeks out. Like, there's only so many conversations I can have in this amount of time, and them also have enough time to review all the documents, be comfortable with the investment, actually get us the money, especially if it's like through an IRA or something, it's going to take some time, and we got to close this thing.
Yeah.
So we're like scrambling a little bit. We're a little worried. So I actually contact the seller, which was my mentor. I'm like, hey, we're about $150,000 shy on this deal. Obviously, I'm not trying to like scare you or anything. Still think we can close it, but what do you think about helping us raise the last bit? Because I was like, it'd be a win-win. You raise the money for us.
Yeah.
Then it immediately goes back to you and everybody wins. So he took about
you keep a little piece of the pie. Yeah.
Right. He took about 2 to 3 days to think about it. And he was like, I just don't feel, ethically right. It doesn't feel right to be on both sides. I don't think I could do that to my investors. And I'm like, all right, I get it. And so I'm thinking, I read that in the initial like text message or email or however he had messaged me that. And I'm like down about it. Like, dang, what are we going to do now? But then he's like, I've got this investor that's invested with me a couple of times. He's actually raised some money for us in a couple of deals we've done. Great guy, lives over here in Florida in Destin. And I think you guys would work well together. He's kind of got the same vision. He's headed in the same path. He wants to do the same things that you're doing. So how about I make the introduction? I'm like, please make it.
Definitely. Yeah.
So he makes this introduction. We go to brunch together. And it was already like 80% of the solution there was that he was a direct referral. This potential partner was a direct referral from my mentors. I'm like, this dude's obviously got instant credibility there.
Yeah.
And so the other 20% was really like, does he mesh well? Are we headed in the same direction? Do we have
And that
complementary
instant
skill
credibility
sets?
went both directions. You had
Yeah.
instant, I mean, it was him looking at you with instant credibility, you looking at him with instant credibility. And that's the nice thing about referrals is you once again, you take on the reputation of whoever refers you when you get that referral. So anyway, go ahead. Sorry about that.
Yeah. No, absolutely. I mean, and so we had the brunch, and he actually brought his daughter. So that was like another like personal touch. We were able to like meet someone in his family. He seemed really cool. We all kind of had like, the same sense of humor. We all thought a lot of the same things were funny. We were headed in the same direction. He had the same vision of where he wanted to head. And so we're like, it makes way too much sense not to do this. So, let's go ahead and jump into this. Let's make this thing happen. And he was like, okay, great. I've already got like $300,000 waiting to move into the deal. I'm like, well, we only need 150, but great. Awesome. So then 2 weeks goes by, we get ready to move towards the closing table. And, in a 2-week period, he brought $700,000. He had raised $700,000 for this deal. We're like, we only needed 150. What are we going to do with the extra like $550,000? And so he just had that like set aside while we were like waiting to shoot for the next deal. We're like, well, we need to make this like permanent relationship. You obviously got some kind of skill set here to continue to raise more and more capital. And so we ended up, then just 2 weeks goes by, we get ready to go to the closing table, and closing didn't happen. It got delayed. And so we can discuss why that is if you like.
Yeah, let's hit it. Why did closing get delayed?
Closing got delayed. It was supposed to be December 1st was our initial closing date, but we got the property under contract early September. And then late September and late October, we had 2 hurricanes hit Mobile, Alabama. And it was like the 2 most, painful or deadly hurricanes that have happened to Mobile in like a 16-year time frame. What are the odds that even one would hit? Nevertheless, 2. So now we've got 2 hurricanes that hit. We've got this property under contract that now all the roofs have blown off. All the siding is destroyed. There's like trees down everywhere. There was no power at the property for a while. There's a lot of interior damage to some of the units. And we're like, oh my gosh, we've got all this money raised. Are we going to close? The biggest question is, do we keep moving forward? Is this still a deal? And so we ended up, there was a lot of, back and forth, and there was some confusion with their power of attorney that they had, their power of attorney company that they had actually handling their insurance claim. They were telling us that there was like almost $800,000 worth of damage. And then we were like, okay, so we expect to get $800,000 at closing. We'll get all this stuff fixed. It'll be back to normal, even better, because all the stuff will be brand new. So we're thinking everything's on the up and up. And we were told this on the 1st of December, on the day we were supposed to close. And so we had scheduled a delay all the way to the end of the month because we still wanted to close within the year, because that was a big promise we had to our investors. And then we get to 3 days before the end of the year, before the last business day of the year that we could actually close. And we finally hear something back from the insurance company on how much they're actually going to pay out. They tell us they're only going to pay out $350,000. And we're told we've got this $800,000 worth of damage. So we're like, well, we might just have to pass on this one. But we're like, well, we're not going to give up that easy. We've gone this far. Let's dive into the numbers. Let's figure out why 350, what the heck's going on. So I'm talking about, these were like 24-hour days, man, like no sleep. We're on the phone all the time, talking to the power of attorney, talking to the contractors, talking to the seller, talking to us amongst ourselves, trying to analyze what the heck's going on and what we're going to do. And then also trying to keep the investors up to date. Like, hey, we still haven't closed. What the heck's going on? Trying to have all these conversations. So we ended up finding out that this power of attorney, like the way they had it set up, the $800,000 was primarily going to them. They were going to make a big chunk of that money, and they were just stating that it was going to cost that much to actually fix, which at the end of the day didn't matter to us. If we were going to get the money from the insurance company, who cares where it goes, as long as it gets fixed, you can get paid, you did the work, whatever. But now we don't have the money. So we're not paying you, $550,000 to do this work. So
Yeah.
what are we going to do? What's happening here?
Yeah.
And we ended up finding out that it was only going to cost like $270,000 to replace all 7 roofs, get all new vinyl siding, paint the exterior, and then have an additional like $70,000 to do whatever with. And so we're like,
oh, numbers work. All of a sudden numbers work again. Yeah.
yeah, now the numbers make sense. Like, why are you way overcharging? We can go with this other contractor over here that does amazing work because he's worked on a couple of the properties that Reggie had, been flipping over the last 10 years. So we know his work's good. Yeah, let's just get this guy in here. So we ended up letting our the power of attorney go, letting that company go, and bringing in this other contractor. Now the numbers make sense, and then we close. Last day, and we're told from our attorney, because now we didn't have their power of attorney. So we were like, maybe there's still a way to get the rest of that money from the insurance company. So we get closer to closing, close, and our attorney specializes in real estate law and insurance law. And so he tells us that he thinks he can get us the other like $400,000 if we do like go through these,
jump through a couple of hoops and you get the money.
Yeah, jump through a couple of hoops. So I was like, if we got an extra $400,000, we could basically give like an immediate investor capital return. Like this deal is just getting juicier and juicier. So we closed and the deal. Now we're 3 months in advance, and we're still jumping through hoops. But the deal seems to be getting juicier and juicier. Nothing's came to fruition, but we got the $350,000 check at closing. We've got we're in the process of fixing everything, making it all brand new, and everything's going great right now.
Sweet. That's awesome. Well, hey, glad it's working out for you so far. And, it's amazing. You guys were able to take that. Insurance claims, hurricanes like that, can be a blessing in disguise. I remember on one of my single family homes several years ago, and this is probably a dozen years ago. We had a big windstorm come through, gusts up to 120 miles an hour. So hurricane force winds in Salt Lake City, actually, which is kind of weird, but, blew our fence down, blew our roof off. And, fortunately for us, we had a huge insurance payout, that put a new roof on. It was an old roof. It was a 20-year-old roof and a 20-year-old fence. But, I think those, that's why you have insurance. And, it kind of highlights the importance of keeping that insurance on there. But also, the insurance money or the insurance payout can actually go to the new owner, through a transaction, which is something that, a lot of people look at distressed properties like that have an insurance claim on them and immediately, run away. But there's always options if you're willing to work through the options. And looks like it's gonna turn out very well for you guys. So once again, congratulations on closing. Glad it's working out so far. Next question I have for you is what's next for you?
What's next for us? Like I mentioned earlier, we got another 148 units under contract, another 88 units we'll probably get under contract either today or tomorrow. And the goal for us in this year, 2021, is to reach 1,000 units. Nice. And that number comes from just kind of being a nice round number, but that's, also that my goal, my wife and I's goal, and then one of my partner's goals is to go full time in this business this year. Get out of our W-2s and go full time. So we know that if we can even get close to that unit count, that level of passive income, as long as we keep doing deals that meet the same number of qualifications that we've been doing, then we'll get to that threshold and we'll be out of the W-2 and everything will be great. We'll really be able to build more systems and processes around it. Now that we're full time, we'll be able to spend more time, I guess, like analyzing deals, creating relationships, the whole shebang.
More time in the business, working in the business, working on the business. Yeah.
And then more time with family as well, more time with what actually matters. So that's kind of our big goal for this year. But then we actually just finished, or I just finished putting together our Vivid Vision. I don't know if you guys have ever read that book. Shameless plug, recommend go checking it out. Vivid Vision by Cameron Herold. But I just finished putting it together, and it's basically just a vivid idea of where you're headed in the next 3 years. And then in that 3-year mark, what is what's your life going to look like? What's your business going to look like?
Mhm.
Where are there going to be like employee benefits? What's it smell like? Where are you living? How many employees do you have? How much money are you making?
Yeah.
So we really just sat down and zeroed in on what we wanted. And so
Mhm.
now that we've got a target to aim at, we're able to really propel ourselves even further into that. So
Nice.
that's kind of where we're headed.
Awesome. So now here's probably the biggest gem, I hope, of the whole podcast here. Here comes the question. Ready? What advice would you give an aspiring investor who's 6 to 12 months behind you?
What advice would I give to an
Mhm.
aspiring investor? I'm going to have to say, just start doing something.
Mhm.
Just start learning. First of all, I guess figure out what it is you're even wanting, like
Mhm.
why real estate. You asked me what is my fiery why
Mhm.
earlier. If you don't have a why, you're going to get burned out in this industry
Yep.
almost immediately. So figuring out why and where you want to head, and
Mhm.
then just getting started. Like
Yeah.
a lot of people think, I think one big myth inside of real estate or any business is that you can go out and you can take massive action immediately. And that's, just right
Mhm.
from the get go, you're going to take this massive action. How many people do you really know that go out having no experience in real estate, no money, no nothing, and buy 1,000 unit property, their first deal, just them?
Yeah.
It doesn't happen.
It
You
doesn't.
take baby steps. You
Mhm.
make the phone call, you Google what the heck Bigger Pockets is, you listen to a podcast, you read an article, you talk to someone, you
Mhm.
go out to someone for coffee. You have all of these small baby steps that eventually accumulate to you having taken massive action. But
Yep.
it doesn't start with massive action. So don't let the fear of like not knowing where to start or not knowing what to do like stop you from getting into this. Just take one small baby step a day,
Yep.
and you'll be surprised where you get in the next
Yeah.
6 to 12 months.
Yeah, it's like the proverb, a journey of 1,000 miles starts with one step. And that's exactly true. I mean, that's what I found as well is, consistent daily action, consistent action pushing the ball forward, whatever, metaphor you want to use, eventually is going to get you there. Eventually is going to create massive results. So I love it. Priceless advice. All right, last question. How can listeners learn more about you?
Yeah, you can check out our website at ferraricapital.com. Go to that about tab, actually check out our vivid vision that I was just mentioning. If that's something you're interested in putting together, or if you
Yep.
just wanted to learn who we are, what we're doing, where we're headed, and see if it isn't something that you might want to be a part of. And then we've got a whole bunch of other things on the website. You can check out all my social media links or podcasts or what have you, but just checking out my website is probably the best way.
All right, awesome. Well, hey, appreciate you coming on the show today, and we'll put a link to the website in the show notes, and make sure that people can have access to that. So appreciate it, and once again, congratulations on your first deal and your second deal, and soon to be your third deal and your fourth deal. So you're on fire right now. So this is awesome. So appreciate your time again, and we'll talk again soon, I'm sure.
Absolutely. Thanks so much for having me on the show, man.